Before I start, can I also commend to you Professor Heiho's paper, which I read with great pleasure and found great insights in there. So I commend it to you. It's a really wonderful paper about combining these traditions of Chinese, British and American thoughts about education into an agenda for Hong Kong and indeed for all of us. Secondly, can I thank the Hong Kong government and especially the Ministry of Education for the opportunity to be here and for putting together such a fantastic event and such a wonderful opportunity for those of us who have come from other parts of the world to learn from the amazing things happening here in Hong Kong in education and in other ways. I was very struck actually in the last hour or two by the different perspectives on time in Hong Kong. You listen to Professor Heiho or other people talk about Chinese philosophy, and it's quite normal to refer to somebody 500 or 700 or even thousands of years ago. But when I was driving in from the airport with a colleague from the Ministry of Education, I said, that looks like a new building there. And he said, no, it's old. It's been there for at least 5 years. So I'm not quite sure what old and new mean in Hong Kong. But I do know that the new academic structure is new. And I also know that it's been a wonderfully well thought through, planned, prepared and implemented reform. And I think it will be something that all around the world we will be watching with interest as Hong Kong builds on its already very high performance in education. And I think with the new academic structure, we'll go further. My theme this morning is to talk about what's happening around the world as education systems seek to improve and as they seek to develop and build on what's happened. And what we know over the last 10 years from PISA and from the TIMSS comparisons is a lot more about what are the combinations of policies that enable systems to improve. And Professor Lee referred to the McKinsey reports. There are two, one in 2007 and one in from December of last year, and I want to refer to the second of those, which is called How the World's Most Improved School Systems Keep Getting Better. And before I go into the details of the report, though, I just want to talk about the world we're in and the challenges and build on some of Professor Heiho's comments. We're in a very rapidly changing world. Everybody's familiar with the impacts of globalization and technology. It's very visible here in Hong Kong, but it's also very visible wherever you go these days. There's no escape around the world from those two huge forces that in many ways are bringing us huge opportunities for the liberation of human potential, but also huge challenges. A couple of years ago, I was at a friend's 50th birthday party. It was in Wales, and we had the party on a Saturday, and on a Sunday we climbed one of the hills in Wales, the whole group together, and it was a great pleasure and a great opportunity to meet people that you'd never met before. And I found myself walking next to somebody I didn't know, and I asked him what he did for work, and he said, it's a very English phrase this, he said he was a monumental stonemason. It means he carved gravestones. So I think I must have been feeling particularly pretentious that morning, and I said to him, it must be very nice to be in a line of work not affected by globalization and technology. He said, I would go out of business if I didn't buy my stone over the internet from India. I tell this small story because if monumental stonemasons and their work is affected by globalization, that doesn't leave many people who aren't affected by it. It's changing everything. And when we educate the children in our schools in Hong Kong or Britain or America or Africa or Pakistan or South America or wherever it might be, we're preparing them for the world that is being transformed by globalization and technology. And that asks big questions of our school systems all around the world. Even the best systems know that whatever they're doing now isn't enough for the 21st century that's ahead of us. So the first question, before I go into the details of the McKinsey report that I want to try and answer is, what do we want our children to know, understand, and be able to do in the 21st century? And as Ruth was mentioning a few minutes ago, many systems in the 20th century educated an elite. And for the rest of the population, they considered that a kind of basic education would be enough. That was certainly true in Britain. It was certainly true in America. But it was true also in the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc and many other parts of the world too. But now in the 21st century, when we look at those forces that are changing the world we live in, we ask ourselves, what do we need every child, every young person to learn, to know, understand, and be able to do? And because I know that in Hong Kong, you're all very, very good at mathematics, because I've seen the TIMSS results and the PISA results over many years, and I've also sat in maths teaching in Hong Kong and been very impressed. I've tried to summarize what I think children should know, understand, and be able to do in an equation. If you look inside the bracket first, K stands for knowledge. Of course, some knowledge is absolutely essential. Some people say you don't need knowledge anymore because you can check everything on Google. Not true. We need knowledge of Pythagoras' theorem, what it means, how to make it work. We need knowledge of how to read and write, often in 1, 2, or 3 languages, depending on where, preferably at least 2. We need knowledge about the place we live in, the world we live in. So knowledge, some knowledge, is absolutely fundamental to the future, and we want everybody in our schools to master that basic knowledge. But although we often say in conversation, knowledge is power, nobody really, when they think about it, thinks knowledge on its own is power. Because if you haven't got the ability, which is what the T stands for, to think about that knowledge, to connect different pieces of knowledge, then you haven't really got the opportunity to use the knowledge. So the second thing in the equation is T, the ability to think. And there are many different ways of thinking, in groups and on your own, rapidly under pressure or reflectively over a period of time, deductively or inductively, creatively or logically. All of these are different ways of thinking. I'm not suggesting it's a different set of lessons. I'm suggesting that all of our teachers, through the teaching they do, need at the same time to be teaching children different ways of thinking, learning how to learn, different ways of connecting the pieces of knowledge they're learning in the world. So knowledge plus thought is a big step forward. But even that isn't enough to be powerful and influential in the world, which is why there's an L inside the bracket, and the L stands for leadership. And by leadership, I don't mean just leading a large organization like a school or a Ministry of Education or a country. I mean leadership in the sense of being able to influence people around you. And we need our young people to come out of school with the capacity to influence people around them in their community, in their family, in their workplace. If you talk to employers about what they want from young people as they move into the workforce, they certainly want knowledgeable people who can read and write and know some things. They want them to be able to think in different ways, but they also want them to be expressing their ideas, coming with new ideas, being creative, being thoughtful about the future. So K plus T plus L. And actually, if you look at the new academic structure, you find all those elements within it. And I think it's a model to the world as to the kind of combination that we need for young people in the future. And then outside the bracket is the E, which stands for ethical underpinning. There are a certain set of values that are essential to the 21st century. You can't make a great city like Hong Kong or London or Toronto work unless people learn to get on with people who have different backgrounds, different views of the world, different religions, different perspectives than they do. So there's a core value about being able to get on with people who are different from oneself. There's a core value about thinking about the future of the planet, taking care of the planet Earth now that there are 7 billion people on it, and shortly there will be 9 billion people on it. So put all that together, I think that's the agenda for the 21st century. And the question for every system is, how do we keep improving our systems so that we move towards the ideal of every young person learning what's in that equation? You see, in the 20th century, we didn't attempt to do all that for every child. I was a history teacher in just north of London in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and I taught my class history, and some of them learnt it and some of them didn't. And at the end of the year, I didn't ask myself, why didn't they all learn the history? I said, these children were good students and worked hard, and this one didn't do his homework, and this one didn't like history, and this one didn't like me. And that one wasn't supported by his parents, and then I went on and taught the next class. But in the 21st century, I should be saying, how do I make sure every one of those children in my class reaches high standards? Some of you may, a few years ago, have seen a Peanuts cartoon in which Charlie Brown bets the children at the beginning of the week that he will teach his dog to sing. And the children think this is a good bet, and so they take the bet on, and on the Friday they go back to Charlie Brown and they say, the dog can't sing, we've won the bet. And he says, no, 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 no. I didn't promise the dog would learn to sing, I promised I'd teach him. That is what I was doing in my history class. But in the 21st century, it's not good enough. Everybody needs to achieve those high standards to thrive in this globalized world where technology is changing everything. So with that background, let me rapidly take you through some of the lessons from the McKinsey report that was published a few months ago. The first lesson is, it's not just about money. You can spend a lot more money. This is a number of countries that spent more money between 1970 and 1994 without any real positive impact on their performance. So you can spend a lot of money without getting benefits. I'm not saying money doesn't matter, of course it matters. What I'm saying is investing money on its own won't change performance. So in the report, we looked at 20 systems and asked ourselves these questions. How does a system with poor performance become good? How does a good system become great? So we looked at systems all around the world in different circumstances, everywhere from Madhya Pradesh in India, Minas Gerais in Brazil, to Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea. All of those countries are represented here in this room, plus some parts of the United States, plus Ontario, and so on. And you see the list of the 20 systems that are in the country, that were in the study. 13 of them are well documented with sustained, significant, and widespread improvement in the PISA and TIMSS scores. And some of them, because we wanted to represent the whole world, the developing world as well as the developed world, we found other evidence to show that they had something that was sustained and widespread and significant in terms of their improvement. And then we tried to pull out the lessons. And what you see here in the results is a very wide range of performance with Singapore and Hong Kong, very high performing systems at the top there, and you see that the shift and change in their performance over time. But what we were looking for is not what is their current performance, but how did they improve? What was the combination of policies that enabled in each of these different systems improvement to occur? One of the things that's interesting to policymakers around the world is how systems with very similar expenditure have very widely ranging levels of performance. So if you look at the orange band there, you can see several systems with similar levels of performance from Poland through to the US, but very different levels of expenditure for the same level of performance. Or if you look at the range in other ways, again, you see that the amount of expenditure per student doesn't determine the outcomes. Again, it's about the combination of policies, plus, of course, the investment that makes a difference. So what are the lessons? Well, first the good news. With the right combination of policies, whatever the starting point of a system, and there are many represented here in the room, Indonesia through to Korea, for example, whatever your starting point, you can improve very visibly, very noticeably within a 6-year period with the right combination of policies. And here you see 4 systems at different levels of performance: Chile, Latvia, Saxony, one of the provinces of Germany, and Hong Kong, all of them with very significant improvement according to the PISA data within a 6-year period, but all with different starting points along our scale of poor to fair, fair to good, good to great, and so on.